Hey, y'all, and welcome to another edition of the Unscripted Huddle, brought to you by the National Football Alliance. The NFA's purpose is to honor, improve, and advance the sport of tackle football. If you're the parent, coach, or administrator of a youth or high school player, you're in the right place. We aim to deliver an authentic voice regarding performance, safety, and the medical truth to support you and your players. My name is John Reagan. With me is Joe Rafter. Let's kick it off.
Welcome back to another edition of the Unscripted Huddle. My name's Joe Rafter, and I'm joined with John Reagan, a special guest here today, brought to you by the National Football Alliance. John, we've had a couple guests, over our startup here that I get really fired up about, and you've seen that happen once or twice. You kind of have to rein me in. You may have to do the same thing here today because I'm thrilled here to have you introduce and welcome our
Yeah, I'm going to have to rein you in even on the introduction, for goodness sake. So, no, we are excited to be here, and thanks, Joe, for that. We're joined today by Merril Hoge, obviously a name known in football for decades, whether it's involvement as a player, involvement on the outside, or involvement as a broadcaster. And so hopefully, Merril, you won't do too much to make us look, these non-professional broadcasters, look too bad here today. But welcome to this, and man, let's just jump right in at first down. And why don't you tell us a little bit about, obviously our listeners know who you are, but maybe a little bit about your involvement in football from different aspects more than just as a player.
Yeah, well, thanks, John and Joe. I'm honored to be here. Appreciate what you guys are doing to help people. I speak all over the country. At some point within the 5 minutes of my presentation, I try to make it understood. I'm a product of a lot of people. People have challenged me, people have inspired me, and I find hope in people. And that being said, when I think about football, it's probably fed me some of the greatest people that I've ever been around. I am a product of a lot of the head coaches that I've coached for, players I've played with, Walter Payton, Chuck Noll. We may get into them a little bit, definitely Chuck Noll. I don't just assume everybody knows who I am. So I played I played football for 22 years. I started playing at age 8 for McDonald's, and I ended up playing 22 years of football, a majority with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I ended my career with the Chicago Bears, my two favorite teams as a kid. I was one of the first players. Well, I was the first player in NFL history that was that had a baseline of head trauma, a cognitive baseline that they used to end my career. And this was in 1994. But I was the first group of players in NFL history, and I think most people won't even know this. And this actually clears up history, identifies, where did it all start? Where was something being done about head trauma? I could tell you right where it started, and the organization that did it, the person who sparked it, to do something about head trauma aside from just evaluation, and it was Chuck Noll. In 1991 was the first time a cognitive test had been offered to players, and Mr. Rooney allowed that to happen too in the organization, and it was voluntary. It wasn't mandatory, it was voluntary. But where it all started actually was Chuck Noll. First of all, another first. They may still be one of the only teams in the NFL. Well, the first team, let's put it this way, this is a fact, NFL history, first time an NFL team had a cognitive neural doctor on staff to evaluate head trauma. It wasn't done by a family practitioner or somebody in the medical field. It was somebody who was specialized in that area, and that was Joe Maroon. And so Joe Maroon looked at Bubby Brister, who had a concussion in Washington when they were the Washington Redskins. And on Friday, he came in to look at him, and he was evaluating him, and he went into Chuck's office, and he said, I don't think Bubby should play. Now, just so people understand, in the NFL, Friday is dress rehearsal practice. That means, hey, he's in the barn, you're buttoning it up. You get ready to play on Sunday. So for a coach to hear this, that could be disturbing. Now, what people have to understand about Chuck Noll, who's the only coach in NFL history to win 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. He's one of the Mount Rushmores of the NFL. And not how he just taught the game, but how he challenged people and prepared people for life. He was a great teacher, an incredible leader, and he thought outside the box. He was one of the first coaches I ever learned the difference between reacting and responding. He thought through things and he didn't react. He always responded. So after he heard this news, he's like, well, how do you say that? Why do you say that? And he's like, well, I didn't like some of his answers. And he goes, but I watched him all week in practice. He looks absolutely fine, and he did well in practice. And then Joe said, well, this is very complicated. It's not easy, and it's it's just my evaluation. He's like, well, if it's that complicated, how am I going to trust just your evaluation? I think we needed to have things that are subjective and objective, if it's that complicated. And that's where it started.
Wow.
And he's like, well, why don't you come up with some other type of tool so that we can administer that to players, and then we have more information to do the right thing for the players. He wasn't saying, oh, you're an idiot, I'm not going to do this. But a coach sparked and challenged a person in that neural field to do something about it. The neurologist didn't, there was no medical doctors weren't thinking about that and doing stuff like that. Nobody gets credit for that. I've even been on podcasts where military people try to take credit for starting something. No, you didn't. I give you the exact date this started. The challenge started in 1989, 1990. It was administered in 1991. Nothing in history had been done from a cognitive testing perspective, subjective and objective, ever, in any environment, and even the military. We shouldn't argue anyway about who started it, but that's the factual facts.
Merril, Didn't that spawn the impact test that Joe?
Well, that was impact. Yeah. That was the test that became impact. Yeah. That is, very widely known throughout the country. But it all started there. So that was the initial start of the proper care of head trauma. Okay, at the end of the day, and they had to talk me into doing that test. And this is the ignorance, okay? So, because I use this term, because what a lot of people will do, and as we talk about a bunch of subjects, you're going to use the information that you have at this time. So you have to paint a perspective of where you really were at that time. So in 1991, listen, having a concussion was like, how many fingers?
Right. Yeah, how many fingers? Right. What are you supposed to do on the next play with your teammate standing behind the doctor telling you what to do?
Yeah. There was nothing. Right. That was not a big deal or something that was thought of as concerning. And this speaks to my response. I said it was voluntary. It's about an hour long. I train every morning for some 3 or 4 hours. The last thing I want to do is sit in a stupid room, take a stupid test. And here's my reasoning for not doing it. Because John Norway, who's a Hall of Fame trainer now, but he was one of our trainers that we had brought in to elevate the care of all things. He's following me out to my car because I'm leaving. He's like, well, Merril, and he's challenging me. He knows how to get to me because he's like, well, let's say you take the test because you can show you're the smartest one on the team. And I'm like, all right. You know what? You know how to push my buttons.
Make it competitive.
Challenge your ego.
But I said, hey, John, listen, why do I need to do this? I wear a helmet. That was my response. I was like, I wear a helmet. So that just speaks to what you knew at that time. So anyway, I ended up doing the test, voluntary. I went and did the test. Never thought it would ever come about. I'd never used it again, never thought about it again. So what happened, well, I don't need to get into that. So my career in Chicago ends up, and I ended my career, I left Pittsburgh, I played there for 7 years. I went to Chicago on a 3-year deal. In my first year, I ended up having to retire because of improper care of head trauma. And I say that because that is still the ultimate key to this very day and the things that we fell in. It's about care. It's not about head trauma. Do we want to reduce it and minimize it? We're doing everything you can possibly do, from how you teach the game, how you practice the game, the equipment that you use, and all different degrees. It's the safest any sport has ever been in the history of sports, that being said. In fact, and people go, well, I still don't want my kids to play because I don't want them to have a concussion. I was like, okay, now slow down. If you don't want them to have a concussion, make sure that you change your language, because the leading cause of head trauma in the entire country is tripping and falling. The most dangerous environment.
I knew that answer, John, because Merril's told me that in the past.
The most dangerous environment where that is going to happen is your home. So instead of, acting like I'm doing the right thing for my kids and they're not going to allow that, really the right thing is then don't let them live at home. Don't let them step in the shower. Don't let them walk upstairs. Don't let them jump on the trampoline. Don't let them live and play. Okay, don't let them roughhouse in the front, the front room and jump over couches and tackle each other and do what kids do as they grow up and evolve.
Right, so
you're better off. Go ahead.
No, finish your statement there.
Well, I just say parents are better off. I say this all the time. It's better to live by what you trust than by what you fear. And most people live in fear. And that's because they're uneducated and uninformed and not empowered with, if it does happen, what do you do? And having a process and protocols, which are in sports, by the way. I'm not saying they're executed all the time, but I pull my kid out if they're not executed. That's part of a parent's responsibility from around 8 to 14, 8 to 18. Anytime you get beyond, high school, even in high school, there's a bigger responsibility of the environment there and the people running that need to be in charge. But youth sports, parents really need to be involved and make sure that protocols are being applied to particular injuries. And so you're better off to know what I should do with my kid, if it does happen, and then understand all of the amazing treatments, cares, and process you can go through that repairs you. And once those steps are executed properly, your return to play is as safe as it was before the injury.
Yeah. It's just like every other injury. And head injury is like needs to be approached like other injuries. It's treatable, and you find a way to get back into your life activities, whether it's a knee or a back or an elbow or a hand or a brain injury. Merril, I want to go to second down here. Pivot a little bit from our normal content because I've had the benefit. I see your shirt, and your hat, and I've had the benefit.
You see the red.
I see all the red. I see it all. But I've had an opportunity to hear you talk about your Find a Way message, and I've read the book. So I thought I might ask you. Tell us a little bit about what Find a Way means to you.
Well, Find a Way for me will end up helping me live a dream and fight to live. The message I share when I get to speak is what's possible for people. If they do a few things that they're in full control of, they take ownership of their journey. They learn to control their mind versus their mind control them. And that's a challenge for us all the time, but there's ways that people can learn to control their mind, and the more those are applied, the more those are developed, the more powerful your journey will be, the more peace will come, happiness, joy, all the things that you want in life, the success in craft, profession, and personally. Because I've seen it, I've lived it, people that learn to control their mind can overcome anything and can become anything. And I've experienced that, and I just know that this tool is our greatest weapon. But, what we feed it is ultimately what we will be. There's a quote I stumbled across as a kid, still a principle of my life, a foundation of my journey, is by Aristotle, and it's, we are what we repeatedly do. Now, just think of that right there. If you just think that, everybody can take inventory right now. Just think, what do you repeatedly do? Who tells you who you are? Now, the truth and power in that means you can be anything. You can become anything. It's about what you repeat, what you tell yourself, how you feed yourself from a mental perspective. And if you love the path you're on, I've always encouraged people and find ways really about this too, then build on it. Don't be stagnant. Stagnant is the quicksand of life. And if you don't like the path you're on, man, you can change it. You're in charge of that. You've got power to do that. It's about starting here and what we feed ourselves, how we program ourselves. And that process can be powerful. And once people learn to do that, and cut the noise out, focus on what they can control versus what they can't control in life, and they work and execute in that arena, man, massive things happen that are incredibly rewarding to people. And that's what the message is about. And
right on. Merril and John, question for both of you guys. Coaching a football player. I think a lot of what I've seen in my experience is that, we're always coaching X's and O's and technique and position and work ethic and attitude, right? You're always coaching those things, but I think I think most of the attitude and effort comes through osmosis, right? It comes through coach saying, "Hey, I want you to run harder," or a player, competing against another player and having to level up their effort or their intensity. How have you guys? What have you guys done? What are your recommendations? Your hacks? Your top tricks or techniques for coaching the mental part of the game?
Well, boy, I've coached every level from 8 to 18. I mean, really 8 to 38. It just depends on what age I'm in. I really started running football camps. Did that for about 10 years, 8 to 18, and there's a wide scope from 8 to 18. I have a parenting tool that I use that actually turned into a coaching tool, even turned into a business tool, but started as a parenting tool, but it became a great coaching tool. And what I try to help my coaches with to give perspective and patience is, let's judge our kids in the yardsticks of their years and not ours. It's going to give us patience and perspective. So let's say 8 years old, okay? We're dealing with an 8-year-old. This happened. And now I started all these things flood into my head. I got this, okay, so we have 2 practices a week. I think our last practice was Thursday. We play Saturday. And in youth football at age 8, everybody runs the perimeter. You can design a power O right over the tackle. Okay, that ain't going to be a power O. You can only
bounce it outside.
If it ever happens,
the guard's going to pull the perimeter. So forget where the ball's going.
Yeah. A lot of things are going to happen. And then none of them are going to be what you coached on, right? And most everybody runs to the perimeter. Okay, so our corners, we prepared for them for that. We really worked a lot on it, and worked on contain. Okay, so keeping the ball carrier and the inside shoulder, and just some fundamentals to walk through and execute. First run, here it comes to the corner, and our corner goes running in there, and they run right around it. Okay, so there was nothing that we talked. And one of my coaches was like, "Oh my gosh, what? He's throwing his hat. He's crazy."
I told him.
And I said, "Well, true." I go, when did you tell him that? We talked about this on Thursday, man. We went over this. I said, whoa. Thursday? I go, it's Saturday at 9 a.m. He done forgot that by the time he got home, okay? He forgot everything on this field at 9 o'clock. That practice is irrelevant to him. Irrelevant. I go, we have to reintroduce that like every play. Every play. And that's actually where that's when I started using it as a parenting tool or a coaching tool. And I went out in the huddle, and we called timeout, and so we walked through it again. Because we knew, it's coming again, okay? And it ends up coming a few plays later, and the kid did a really good job. Now, he played it much differently. Okay, a few plays later, here comes again. He does right back the old way, okay? So I was like, that's just the way it is. Okay, it's 8 years old. And so I guess to answer your question is, I found growth in that. At 8 years old, if a kid will do it a couple times right, that's pretty good. You know what? That having that right perspective. Now, not 18.
It's a little different.
Well, now we're talking, if you do it a couple times wrong, now we got a problem.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I'll jump in and say this. I think that one of the things I always try to take pride in is kind of a two-thought approach to the coaching side. Granted, most of mine was at the high school or 28 years out at the college level. But it was two-pronged. It was one, meet them where they are. So start where they are, and no ceilings. And what that meant for me was I got to figure out where they are in their knowledge base to know how I can coach them. It could have been for me, even in the Big 12, coaching an offensive lineman who didn't know what a 3 technique was. And so now I'm starting with language, right? I got to teach him the language first. But regardless of where he was starting, there was not going to be a ceiling. Just because I'm teaching him what a 3 technique is doesn't mean that he can't block the guy across from him better than anybody else in the country. And so that was really what it was. And for me, what that allowed was repeated consistency, right? So no different if you read about how do you build good habits, how do you create bad habits. How do you make changes in your life? It's just consistent behavior over and over and over again, and hopefully consistent thought over and over and over again. But to do that, to help the players do that, you've got to figure out where they are, where they're starting from, and meet them there. And then don't put a ceiling on it, because they may grow, no different. It sounds corny as heck, but no different than, a crop out there in the field. Some of it may grow really, really fast, and some of it may grow what is exceedingly slow, but eventually it's all going to be harvested with the same fruit. So, or vegetable, I guess. But I think that's kind of for me what it's been.
If I were to kind of riff on that a little bit, John, I think, Merril, that you meet them where they are, and they may be physically one place and emotionally a different place. Yeah. Particularly, back to Merril's comments, I completely agree. Most of my coaching has been at the youth level with some at the high school level, and meeting them cognitively, emotionally, I think is the much harder part than at the the physical side, right? Because it's easier to test the 40-yard dash and the some of those kinds of physical performance, but getting to know those kids and what they're how they're wired inside of their mind. Back to some of the comments that you mentioned, Merril brought this question up for me. Is I find the art a big part of the art of coaching.
Yeah. Last on it, because I just found that having played it for 22 years, coached it for nearly 30, the value, and it really started with actually Chuck Noll. I didn't realize all of the true life lesson values that come from playing, sports, but really specifically football. And the things that he opened, I remember first time I ever heard your life's work is not football. That was one of my first meetings with the Steelers. I'm like, what? What's he talking about? I was like, God, won 4 Super Bowls, been around for 30 years, been coaching and playing for 50. And I was like, what? It's like, he lost his mind. And it's true, But, man, the sport can help you learn a lot about and develop a skill set, tools where you put in your tool belt of life, and you get to move on outside that arena and apply them. And one of the ones that I probably learned the quickest and tried to instill, no matter what age group it is, the older they get, the more they should understand it. But really in the professional level, kids in the college level, even high school level. In my desk, I had a plaque built because I got tired of players coming in and giving me excuses. I mean, I'd have players going, "Oh man, I got up late, and that's why I practiced bad." I was like, "Oh no, wait a minute. So who got you up late?" Well, I mean, that's why I practiced bad. Okay, well, that's it. Like, people who point fingers, cast blame, and make excuses, they make their day easy, but their tomorrow harder. So I put a plaque up. Don't give me excuses, bring me solutions. So every time somebody comes in my office, I'm like, hey, read that before we talk. Oftentimes I can see it in their head, man. They're spinning right now. They're like, oh, man. They're rethinking everything that they're going to say.
It's awesome you say that, Merril. I had a saying with my kids growing up, and after this, I got to move us to third down. I'm not doing my job today, Joe, am I? But I had a saying with my kids that, listen, you can bring as many problems to the table as you want to, but you better bring at least one option as a solution. So you can't just be a problem caller. You got to be a problem solver as well. So I think that's awesome. All right. I'm going to move us to third down, but we're going to piggyback off what you just started saying. If there were 2 things, and you got to limit it to 2, and Joe, you got to help us with this as well, that you think are the most important things a coach can do for or teach his players. So limited to 2. What are those 2?
Okay, so now I think of every level.
Yeah, you could break it up. I mean, we understand that.
Yeah, well.
Joe and I have this discussion a lot. Joe, why don't you kick us off?
So for me, it's number 1 is overcoming adversity. I don't think there's a sport on the planet that teaches its players how to overcome adversity like the sport of football, because it requires so much across. And I always say these cognitively. You gotta know your responsibility. You know, the old Bill Belichick, do your job. So there's a bunch of things you have to intellectually, cognitively understand. Physically, I don't think there's a harder sport on the planet. The demands that it places on its players. Emotionally, your ability to manage yourself and deal with the ups and downs. And then socially, your ability to relate to your teammates. So I think overcoming adversity across those 4 dimensions, by far, football does it more than anything else. So I'll limit mine to 1 because I want to be respectful of time.
Well, actually, this applies to every level. Like every level. But it really became an emphasis in youth sports because I'd sit in our meeting before we got ready for the season, and everybody was focused on one thing: winning. And that's all. Like, we got to win, we got to win, we got to win. I'm like, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Okay. Aren't we better off to teach kids how you go about winning? Mm. What are the things that are going to help you win? So the first thing, and this applies to almost everything in life, being prepared. Like being prepared. That's why we come to practice. We're not out here practicing just to practice. We're practicing to be prepared so that when we go and play, that we have a chance of doing the right thing, especially if we prepare properly. And the better that we prepare, the better chance we have being successful and then winning. Okay, so that was one thing I tried to emphasize at every level. Because even you get older, get up in age, so it's often, Coach, it's just interesting how people just don't realize how important being prepared is and what prepared really means. And I try to make it clear to them too. Listen, sometimes it takes 45 minutes for a team or an hour of practice to get prepared. Okay, and if that's all it takes, that's all we're going to spend. But it might take us 2 hours to get prepared. Whatever it's going to take us to get prepared, we'll get prepared. And then even in a team sport, there's an individual responsibility for every player to do his best. But what I try to get, I go, that's like, I know we all know that. You got to do your best. But I go, here's how you can do your best. If you work on your weakness. Everybody wants to come out and do everything that they're good at. But nobody comes out and works on what they're not good at. And if we would make more time for that and work on the things we're not good at, that's going to make us a better team because we're going to be better individuals. And so those are 2 things that I tried to harp on and build on because there's a couple things that are going to happen. We're going to be a really prepared team, and we're going to be as prepared as you can possibly be. And then everybody's going to get a little better every year and every game and every practice with the weakness that they might have. Yeah. If they could.
Let me just build, John, let me build on that just a second.
Yeah, I was just the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So particularly the youth level. So I want to speak on behalf of kind of the youth coaching perspective. I think a lot of times as youth coaches, to your point, Merril, working on the things that on our weaknesses, working on our, there's A players, B players, and C players, right? And I think at the youth level, you have basically volunteer coaches. They're mostly dads, and they're doing it because their sons or daughters in the program. And I think there's a very natural human tendency to gravitate towards coaching the A players because that makes coach feel like he's a good coach. But what really needs to happen particularly at the youth level is focusing on those B players and C players and helping them to develop themselves, which is harder. It's a lot harder as a coach to do that. But I've also found it translates into better success for the team because if your B players start getting closer to playing like A players and your C players start getting closer to playing like B players, the whole performance of your team elevates. So putting that as a process in place, one of the best practices that we had with an organization I ran out in California is we had one coach. His whole job was to spend time with the C players. He'd spend his whole practice just focusing on the kids who were struggling, and they would get so much better over the course of a season.
I would challenge that that is actually not just a part of it, maybe the most important part of coaching when it comes to what I consider one of the most important parts of coaching, and that's personal accountability. You're teaching players personal accountability, but as a coach, that is truly your job is to, I consider everything I do in life, I want to leave it better than I found it, right? Well, coaching is no different than that. I'd like to leave a team better each day, after every drill, after every practice, and every player better than they came to that practice or to that drill or to that to that period with. And I think that it's personal accountability as a coach, not just as a player, that's got to be taught to look at that and say, that is my job. That is what I have to do. That is what I've been charged and trusted, not just charged, but trusted by parents and youth and high school administrators and then adults as they are in college, arguably, and in the NFL. I mean, that is my personal accountability. So that's a huge part. I will say this, Joe, you've talked about it at different times, a different way. I've mentioned that, players don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And so I do think one of the best things coaches can teach us players is that it's okay for teammates, men, to love each other. That's okay. It's not a weakness. It's something that is hard to say sometimes in our big macho world that we're trying to live in. But not only that it's okay, but it doesn't make us weak. It actually makes us stronger to be able to do that. And so that's where I'll leave us off here. And I think that's gonna. Did that take us into third down? I don't even know where we are at this point in time. I think we did.
I think that was third down. I think
we're going to have a penalty because we were on third down. We're supposed to go fourth down. But
we did. We've done that before too. We've thrown lots of flags. Holding on too long on the offense.
Coming back.
Where do we want to go with fourth, Joe? You want to go something a little bit lighter, or we want to stay in here?
Let's go lighter, and then we'll see.
All right. So let's talk about. We're down to. Let's see. What are we in? We got the divisional round, right, of the playoffs. And I know we all have maybe some teams. I already know who Joe's going to say is the best team in the NFL, regardless of how the Super Bowl plays out. But Merril, we'll let you go. Are there any predictions you have for these people out there, or any thoughts that you have on some of these divisional round games that we have?
Well, it's always easy to tell you who's going to win the Super Bowl. The best team.
There you go, number one. The best team on that Sunday is going to win the Super Bowl.
Right, exactly.
I will promise you that's always true. And then the other layer that people always say defenses win championships. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. If that is true, you got to show me the Super Bowl or the championship or a bowl game. Show me some game where only the defense played. Right. Because if you can't show me that, then that is an ignorant comment. Because at some point, first of all, there's 3 phases to a team. You just excluded 2 other phases. Now, they may not be as strong as maybe your defense, but they have to do something to contribute to the team. So teams win championships. Okay, best quarterback in football didn't even make the playoffs in the NFL side, Joe Burrow. Okay, so quarterbacks don't win championships. Are they important? You bet they are. So is the right guard, the right tackle. And if you actually wanted to, and I've done this for playing this league for nearly a decade and studied it for 40. This is true. This is the one thing that is most true about the championship and this week, Saturday and Sunday, even Monday with the national championship game. But really true in the NFL and winning in the playoffs and the Super Bowl. The people who have the best offense and defensive line play, the most consistent, will win the Super Bowl and will win the Ravens and Bills. Okay, let's use that. That's it's going to be fist. Man, people got it as a fist fight at the 50. You got 2 great quarterbacks that are doing all kinds of things. They talk about MVPs. Man, at the end of the day, that thing is going to happen. Whoever wins that game is going to be right in those trenches. How they play every year. Every year the Super Bowl got over, Jaws and I would we did a wrap-up Super Bowl show. We did it for almost 20 years. And it was unanimous. Every year, we're like, gosh, after you watch the tape, you're like, the MVP was in the trenches. The MVP was like, the offensive line or somebody specifically, more or less as a group. Defensive lineman, there's somebody that was the difference maker. I mean, I'm going to tell you this, Kansas City's won 3 Super Bowls. Sean Jones has been the MVP all 3 times. He made the significant play that allowed Patrick Mahomes to make his plays to win the Super Bowl. If it wasn't for Sean Jones, they don't happen. None of them happen. Oh, Chris Jones.
Yeah, Chris Jones. I think everybody knows who you're talking about. We're good.
Yeah, I'm thinking Sean Jones, who I played for against the Houston Oilers, because there's no Sean. That's Chris Jones. I mean, It's just, I mean, and that is the truth about, especially in the NFL. That is.
So you're really not going to make a prediction on this for us, is what you're telling us.
Well, I'll tell you the one. I've never wanted a team to win a championship or Super Bowl more than Detroit.
What a story, right?
I would love Detroit. I'm telling, and actually, it becomes a better story and a more team story if they do it to what's happened to them defensively. You know, they lost Hutchinson. I do a show with Solomon Wilcox on Sirius Radio, and like 2 weeks after Hutchinson's left, I'm like, they're a little wounded, but they're not. It's not devastating.
The resilience has been remarkable.
It has been remarkable because after some of those injuries,
but then they lose 5-6 other players on defense, and you're like, they ain't got no chance. And they come, and you know what stood out? What's interesting is you plug them on tape. Here's the one advantage they have. Man, they got more energy. They are a fast group. They don't have the seasoning of a season, which that experience could be the difference. But, man, they have a speed and an energy to them that nobody else has because they've been playing 18, 20 games. These other guys played 4 or 5, and, man, you can see the difference when they fly around.
I'll tell you this. They don't have any of that other things because nobody else has a Dan Campbell who gets it. You can tell he gets it.
Well, there's no doubt about that. And listen, we'll go back to leadership. Yeah, we started this whole thing kind of on leadership and the value of learning. Like all those guys, let's say they do win a Super Bowl, but the things that they learn that they're capable of and that they can overcome and they can deal. I tell people all the time, and I've learned more about the darkness in my life than I've ever learned in the light. And that is just true in life. You find out who you are and what you're about and the lessons that team's learning and what they're going through. It's been incredible. I've just thought there was too many injuries defensively to keep winning.
They found a way. You're right.
I'm so glad. My thoughts are dead wrong. I mean, they are just they find a way.
So Joe, I know who who you're positive is going to win the Super Bowl, but who do you think they're going to end up playing, and who are they going to have to beat?
Look, I'm a Philly Eagles fan, and so
I know.
We're never positive. There's always in the back of our minds.
That doom and gloom. Yeah, I've seen it. I've experienced that Eagle.
The Eagles. There's always in the back of our mind, like, this is never.
Birds.
The rug's gonna get yanked out from under us any play now. Like that's the mindset of an Eagles fan. My point of view. So I hate to be against you guys.
When you talk about a team that has fabulous offensive and defensive line play, the only concern is sometimes inconsistent, especially on the defensive side, more so than the offensive side. But if they got on a roll where they played their very best,
man, they're going to be tough.
I mean, it would be hard to go against those.
Yeah, I'm secretly rooting for the Commanders. Not to go against you guys, but I'm rooting for the Commanders because if the Commanders beat the Lions and the Eagles win, then I got an NFC Championship game at home, which is really the best football game I think anyone will ever go to as a fan. I think it's a championship game at home versus the Super Bowl because it is. I mean, you're surrounded by your home field. You got 70,000 fans there. Super Bowl is 50-50. It's very commercial. A championship game at home, man, it is unbelievable.
Merrill, I got to point something out here and call Joe out on this. I might even have to throw a flag. We talk about football being the ultimate game of unselfishness, right? And here he just wants the Commanders to beat the Lions, so to make an easier path for the. He's going to say it's unselfish because he wants all the Philly fans to experience the championship game, but he just wants an easier path to the Super Bowl.
Well, it would be easier.
It's honestly
on paper, just on paper.
Just on paper.
I got to catch myself. There's no
man. They're professionals. They're like no way.
Honestly, we played the New England Patriots. They came into town at 0-10. It was one of the coldest days in Pittsburgh. It was like wind chill was about minus 15. It was just bitter cold, man. It was so freaking cold. We win on a goal line stand.
Wow.
Drew Bledsoe went for a goal, tried to jump over. We ended up stopping it. We win again. We walked off that field, and we're like, first our question is like, how are they 0-10, now 0-11? That's the toughest team we played all year. They were like, and then I was early in my career. I was like, man, there's just no easy Sundays. They are NFL players, NFL coaches, and that's how close it is and how good they are. I don't care who they are.
On. Well, guys, we're coming to the end here. Merril, couple appreciations I want to share. Thanks for being with us on this journey, all the way back from California until now with the National Football Alliance. I can so value your insight, your input. I sent an email to the advisory board about a couple weeks ago, giving an update on what we're doing in the Alliance, and I said in that email that as we build this organization, and I'm challenged with different questions or different decisions to get made, I always, there are times in my mind where I try and think, what would Merril do? What would Joe do? What, Joe Mowgli or Joe Galat? What would Chris do? So your guys being with us on this journey is invaluable. And I'll also say, if you haven't picked up either of Merril's books, find a way. You just had a new release of that, Merril?
Yeah, the third edition. Just came out about 2 years ago. Just almost 2 years ago now. I
read the original one. You got a remarkable life story, and thank you for sharing that, because I learned so much about not only your life story, but what it's like to be a cancer patient through your experiences, your head trauma situations, and just have so much respect and appreciation for who you are as a man. And thank you for everything you're doing in the world. I appreciate it.
Very kind of you, Joe. You're a genuine human being. Thank you.
All right.
Well, go ahead, Joe. Is there anything else there? Otherwise, I'd say this. Well, I appreciate it. Obviously, the first time we've had a chance to talk, and as I got asked the other day, I felt like it was to try to embarrass me, but I got asked the other day how many years I've been involved with football, and the answer was 49, because I started playing. Like you, I remember my first team. You played for McDonald's. I'll never forget that now. I played for the Danley Bees in Montgomery, Alabama, on the Southeast YMCA. And so for a lot of that time, being able to follow you has been a very, very educational and enjoying experience. So I appreciate you joining us. So we'll wrap it here and say, Merril, thank you for joining us on this edition of the Unscripted Huddle, sponsored by the NFA. And we're always trying to, and we thank you for helping us do all we can to honor, improve, and advance the game of tackle football.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks, boys.
See you guys.
Well, that's it for this week. Let's keep the conversation going to help NFA honor, advance, and improve the game of football. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another set of downs on the Unscripted Huddle.